Bruchim Abayim, welcome everyone. We're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, the beginning of Hilchot Shabbat. Siman Resh Mem Vav is where we're holding in the middle of Seif Gimel, and the regular prints of Mishna Berura, you will have it on Daf Tet Amud Bet. We started Seif Gimel that a person cannot rent or lend his animal, his cow, his donkey, his horse, to a Gentile on Shabbat. Even if you do it from the beginning of the week, but you know that they're going to be working them on Shabbat as well, it's going to be prohibited because we are obligated not just to ourselves stop from melacha, but we are obligated to see to it that our animals do not work on Shabbat either, so therefore you can't have it in the hand of the goy. Now, even if the goy says, I promise your animal's not going to be working on Shabbat, it's worthless. But if he promises to give it back to you on Erev Shabbat, so okay, here is, my cow, and you could use it, but you have to bring it back on Friday, that is fine. So now the Shulchan Aruch writes in the second half of this Seif, if you did lend it or rent it out to a Enu Yehudi, and you did make the Tanai, you did make the condition that it should be returned before Shabbat, and he promised, but now what happened was ve'ikeva b'Shabbat, but he didn't bring it on Friday. You're waiting, and nothing. He didn't bring it on Shabbat, on Erev Shabbat. Says the Shulchan Aruch, yafkirena beno leben atzmo kodem haShabbat. Right before Shabbat hits, he's not bringing it back. You make your animal hefker. You denounce ownership over that animal, but not publicly, because if you're publicly, then of course no one's going to do it. It's going to be claimed by the goy, and that would be it. But if a person does the hefker between himself and himself, it's like, I denounced my ownership over this. I don't want the Isur Shabbat to apply to my animal, so it's no longer mine in that way. It should not be Isur. That's what the person should do. Or Yomar behemti knuya le'eno Yehudi. Or you should say, my behemah should be owned by the goy for this, from this moment and on. Kedeh shinatzel me'isura deoraita. In order to save yourself from Isur deoraita. So in other words, you can't say, well, it's not my fault, I made the Tanai. At the end of the day, it's your animal, it's going to be in the hand of the goy. You will have to go there and take it from him, or make sure that it's not being worked. So you can't do that. You don't want to do that. So therefore, what you do is you denounce that ownership that you have over the animal.
Can you claim the ownership back at the later time?
Well, he brings it back. You could take it. It's a gift, right? That's exactly what's going to happen. So says the Rama, says the Rama, if you want, you could do it in front of 3 people. Like other levels of hefker that we have, usually is in front of 3 people to be more valid, and you could do that. Still, no other person, even those people who heard you say that I am denouncing my ownership over here, they cannot go and grab this animal and become zocher, or own it from hefker. Your kavanah is to take away the isur of Shabbat that came upon you without you choosing to have that. V'davka b'Shabbat, aval b'yom tov ein adam metzuveh al shvitat b'yom tov b'yom tov. But this halacha is only on Shabbat. You're not obligated to see to it that your behemah does not work on Shabbat, on Yom Tov rather. That's only a isur on Shabbat. Says the Mishnah Berura, Yafkirena bezu davka b'di'evet. This is only a b'di'evet situation. You can't give your animal to the goy and say, okay, have him for 2 weeks, and then every Shabbat you say, okay, we have the Shulchan Aruch over here in Seif Gimel, Hazak Baruch, and read a Kol Chamirah de Kabir Shuti Hefker Kafra. You can't do that. That's not the Chatchila at all. It's only a b'di'evet situation that you're stuck. That's when you could use this loophole. It says the Mishnah Berura, אבל לכתחילה אסור להזכירה על דעת שכשיגיע יום שבת, שיפקירנו. You cannot use this system to be used לכתחילה, and the Sefer Mati Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda Ayash, and Orach Chaim, he writes that this is the dat of Shulchan Aruch, that lechatchila you cannot do it, because Maran writes this only in a v'di'evid situation. The Kaf HaChaim, the Chida and Birkei Yosef all agree the same way as well, but the Maran Chida in Birkei Yosef brings in the name of the Radbaz, Rabbeinu David ben Zimra, one of the Gedolei Poskim of the time of Maran Shulchan Aruch, was much older than Maran. Many, generally speaking, consider him as the last generation of the Rishonim. He was the last of the Negidim in Mitzrayim. He was in charge of the Jewish community in Mitzrayim. And then he, after 50 years of being the Nagid in Mitzrayim, he moved to Eretz Yisrael. He lived a very long, blessed life, well into his 90s. And he coexisted basically with Maran Shulchan Aruch in Eretz Yisrael. He was much older. Maran respected him to sign first on all the community matters that had to be written by Gedolim. So Maran Chida brings from the Radbaz that even the Chatchila, you could lend your animal to a goy, thinking that if it comes to Shabbat, I'll just give this heter of hefker in front of 3 people, not just between you and yourself, and that he feels it's fine. So again, there's room to be mekel, but these are less relevant because generally speaking, people don't have animals that they are lending to people. You know, the most usually, unless you're a farm owner or you have a horse, you're not necessarily dealing with these questions. But someone that has these scenarios, they should ask their local moreh hora.
There isn't a modern day version of an animal equivalent?
No, it's only by animal, because there's animal and then there's your kalim. Your car is considered a vessel, right? We spoke about that. You're not chayav on shvitat kelav, but you're chayav on shvitat behemto. But again, if a person owns in farmlands, and many people do have investments of that nature, or some people own horses that they use for weekends or for whatnot, horseback riding, and those horses, you have to know all the halachot, whether or not they could be used for, especially when they get older and they're used for other elements.
There has to be a living creature that was used to work.
Correct. Yeah.
Is it nafkamina for renting versus lending? You're saying lending.
Not really. It's laskira. The lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is both, right? Im hishilah or hiskirah leno Yehudi. Same thing, right? Now, that is the first part of the Mishnah Berura over here. Even if you do it in front of 3 people, not everyone knows that this is from Hefker, and people are going to suspect him that he's letting the goy use his animal on Shabbat. That's what they're going to think. Even selling it to goy is not a heter, right? Unless you are selling it a full sale, not a kinyan that is matana la'achzir type of thing, is only for Shabbat. If you sell it completely for all of the weekdays and Shabbat, then it's fine. But if you only sell it for Shabbat, then it's still going to be a problem because of chashad, because people know this is Reuben's cow, this is Shimon's animal, and therefore it's going to be a problem. Now, the Bach allows this, even lechatchila, to rent in order to make it hefker on Shabbat in front of 3 people. Again, we mentioned that the Birkei Yosef, Maran Chida, also brings this in the name of the Radbaz. Because people are not going to have that much suspicion, because 3 people know about it. You could assume that the whole world knows about it very quickly. The Chafetz Chaim writes that push comes to shove, you can rely on the Bach and the Birkei Yosef and the Radbaz. We don't paskin like that, but again, is certainly room to be mekel for extenuating circumstances. Beno leben atzmo. So how does it work exactly? That you're gonna make a hefker between you and yourself. Usually, when you do hefker, at least 3 people should know about it. You want to make it public. That's how you denounce something from your ownership, from your possession. So what's beno leben atzmo? That you do it privately between you and yourself. Shaz eno metzuveh al shvitata kevan she'eno shelo. He says that is enough to remove your ownership from it. It's not considered yours anymore because you made it hefker. V'afal gav the hefker beinan sheyeh bifnei shlosha. Even though normally speaking we need hefker to be in front of 3 individuals. Zehu midrabanan. That's only at a rabbinic level. Midoraita, you stand and you say, I no longer am the owner of this. I remove myself from the ownership of this item. Midoraita, that's not yours anymore. And here would be midoraita. This is what we require.
Across the board, meaning with chametz.
Yeah, with chametz, you're not doing it in front of 3 people. You stand there alone at home at night, after 5 hours of what? We do the mechira again, as the Ramban and the Ran write. We do it because midoraita hefker would be sufficient, right? The reason we do b'dikat chametz is because we are concerned for either of 2 things. Either you're going to find a biscuit and come to eat it, a piece of bread and you're going to forget that is a thing, or your kids are going to eat it, right? And it's going to be a problem. You know, my Rebbe told me that that 1 year he stopped doing putting the 10 pieces at some point because 1 year they couldn't find one of the pieces, and he has a reason to believe that one of his kids ate it on Pesach. So he stopped doing it because you have chametz around, things can happen. That's one reason the Rishonim right, and the other reason is because Shema yimtzak luska yafa, that you may find something, you find a $5,000 bottle of alcohol that you somehow put it in an attic somewhere, and you didn't know that you had it, and after Pesach you're like, if I knew I had that, I would never be mafkirit, and that undoes the hefker, and you end up being over on Bali Matzes. Therefore, Chazal made a rabbinic obligation of doing B'dikat Chametz and Biur Chametz, but we still do the Bitul Chametz afterwards in order to cover all our bases. But it says the Chafetz Chaim Midrabanan, you need 3. Midoraita, you on yourself, you could do it alone. So it says the it's sufficient to do it alone. You don't need 3 people. Here, it's not your fault. You gave it as chirut. You made a tenai with him. You made a condition. He's going to bring it back before Shabbat, and it's his fault he didn't bring it. It's enough to save yourself from the right level of shvitat be'em tom, and that's what we're going to do. Now, Maran in Bet Yosef writes, "Sheyesh poskim shesovrim digam bekan afshu diavad bainan davka telata." Maran writes there are those who say you need 3, the rabbinic level of hefker. Even here, that's not your fault, and so on. Still, you would need 3 people. Now, the reason that you need 3 is because one of them is going to be owning it, picking it up and owning it, and 2 of them are going to be the edim, the witnesses that he actually took it, right? And therefore, Ekav Chaim writes, if these 3, one of them is psule edut, right, then it's not good. You have to have 3 kosher people that know about it. So that's just a tangent, important detail, but no, after Shabbat he could take it. What do you mean?
But aren't you making this before Shabbat?
Yeah.
Aren't you saying this?
Yeah. So he could. Well, they could any time they could be zocha to it, right?
We can say that you
Say the guy can
take the animal as hefker.
Now this animal is ownerless. So if you go hijack it from the goy's house, it's yours. If you go right after Motzei Shabbat and you're the first one there and you pick it up, it's yours, right? So
You need to say that there was you made a hefker, but it's really hefker to take it up.
right. Now if on Shabbat you figure out that the goy is plowing with your cow, right? Can you do hefker on Shabbat? Says, yes, right? Says Chacham Avraham, yes. How do you know?
No, it's the
So it's machloket, right? Maran Chida brings from the Pri Chadash, from Reb Chizkiah de Silva, that you can't do it, right? He says you cannot do it. And on the other hand, Reb Chaim Pentermoli, one of the Abbedins of, was the assistant Abbedin of Turkey, Izmir, in Petach Dvir, he writes, he has a long arichut to prove that you can do that on Shabbat. And Kav Chaim says basically you have to be careful. L'chatchila, you don't want to do hefker on Shabbat. Depends also in the lamdut of it. Depends how the mechanism of hefker works. So this is l'chatchila. You don't want to do that on Shabbat. But if you got stuck and you didn't do it, you forgot, and then now you realize that he's going to be plowing with your cow on Shabbat, you could do it hefker on Shabbat as well in order to save yourself from Isur Doraita. So says the Chafetz Chaim, therefore you have to be careful as much as possible to do in front of three if possible, because of this Maran Bet Yosef that brings this poskim. At least there should be one other person there, not just with yourself. Why? Because the Rabbi Megidorah poskim sofrim daf doraita ena hefker at shefkiran kol panim bifnei adam echad. There are many poskim who hold that even on a doraita level, you need at least one person to be there present. And this is again discussions in Choshen Mishpat, Siman Resh Ayin Gimal, discussing the laws of ownership and hefker, and seems over there in Shulchan Aruch that Maran Shulchan Aruch holds like that. So even though that Maran writes over here, Beno leben atzmo, over there in Choshen Mishpat seems to side with those that one person would be needed. And the Rama over there writes that midoraita you need nobody. You just could do it between you and yourself. So again, this is a machloket rishonim that Maran over here writes like Rosh, like the Shita of Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, that you don't need anyone else between you and yourself is good. Over there, he sides with the others that perhaps you need one additional person. So therefore, it's good if you're not doing it in front of three. At least you should be doing it in front of one. Okay. That being said, if you say it's hefker is one way, but Maran said the second way as well. Second way would be you say my behema is now owned by the goy. How can you do that? The goy doesn't even know about it. How can you put something in someone's domain without them knowing, right? You're transferring ownership to this goy on Shabbat, right? Says the Mishnah Berura, Ayin Magen Avraham shtatu dafka im omer lo befanav. That Magen Avraham holds it only works if you tell the goy in front of him, my behema is going to be yours now. Then, of course, the goy will have kavanah to acquire it and own it, and it becomes his with that saying of the Jew and his mindset and also dominion over the cow, the animal, because it's in his reshut. Then it's going to be, but if he doesn't know anything about it, then it's dvarim betelim. What did you say already? Nothing, right? Now, Magen Avraham is surprising to many of the Achronim because if you make this kinyan in front of another person or in front of the goy, right, that's only if the object is still in my domain. In other words, if this is in my possession and I want to give it to you, I need you to know it and another person to know it. But if it's already in your reshut, right, you are having my cow in your domain, in your barn. It's not in my house anymore. In that case, it does not necessarily need to be in front of himself, the goy, or in front of another person. It could be just between me and myself, and that's what the Machan Ephraim writes in the halachot of ownerships, in halachot kinyan chaser, that if it's in the chaser of a goy, then your saying actually is beneficial. Same thing is with Matei Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda Ayash. Over here, is very surprised, and Magen Avraham, he says, yeah, you missed one of the basics of Hilchot Kinyanim, but be that as it may, the Shulchan Aruch seems to say that you could do it even without talking to the goy. Va'afilu im zikalo, says the Chafetz Chaim, al yedei Yisrael acher, kam ken lo mehani. Even if you are mezake through another person, normally speaking, you could acquire something for someone, right? Let's say some people don't want to give gifts on Shabbat when they go to someone's house, right? Because it's a question. Halachically, mikar adin is not a problem really, especially if you buy it for them from the store. When you go to the alcohol shop, the wine shop, and you want to buy a bottle for them, if you buy it for them, it's already theirs from the moment that you bought it because you had it in mind. But even if you have it in your house already, and you want to give it to them, Meikar Adin is fine. But some people are machmir; they don't want to give gifts on Shabbat. So the way you do it is easy. You take a third party. It's machloket if you could do it through your wife or not, because your wife, as far as kinyanim are concerned, perhaps to the oath in Shulchan Aruch and Shin Nun Vav, I think it is. So if you whether or not it's considered, there's two brightas in Masechet Nedarim, whether or not you could do it through your wife, but a third party you take and you give it to him so you could pick this up for him, for Reuben, and when they pick it up, now the owner is Reuben. Even though that Reuben knows nothing about this whole thing, now he is the owner, right? So normally that's called zichya al yedei acher. You are, having this acquired by someone without their knowledge by the means of the third party making a kinyan on it, right? This is discussed in Chosh Mishpat and Siman Reshmem Gimel. In
And the other person now is liable for what this animal does?
Well, in this case, you want the goy to do it, right? You want it to become the goy's, right? So even if you take another yid and say, here it is, make a kinyan sudar, that my animal should be now owned by the goy, right? Doesn't work. וכן הסכים אחרים מגדים, ושארי האחרונים כמגן אברהם, הוא פשוט אפילו באומר בהמתי קנויה לך בעניין, שיהיה לזה גם כן פסיקת דמים, תהילה וכי אין מחירה כלל, וכן כתב בחיי האדם. Again, it gets into the details of הלכות קניינים. Bottom line is, if you have an animal that could be worked on Shabbat, ask a question specifically, because different details could be changed. And they could change different aspects of halacha as well. כדי שינצל, רוצה לומר, אבל לכתחילה, אין לסמוך להשכיר על דעת שיפקיר. This is not a לכתחילה suggestion, it's only when you're stuck. לכתחילה, you don't want to rely on making hefker or doing any of these tricks, right? Because at the end of the day, the hefker is not known by people, the hakana'ah is not mefursam, and therefore there's chashash of marit ayin. At the very least, you have to deal with people suspecting you of working together with the goy and your animal being worked on Shabbat. So therefore, these are not things that you want to do, you want to rely on. If you're stuck, you want to save yourself from doing a Yisur Doraita, so then you do what the Shulchan Aruch says, but it's nothing that you want to rely on in a regular course of your business or life as a lechatchila. Now, the Rama said that nobody else could go get this, even though that you did hefker in front of 3 people, right? You could only imagine what's going on through the mind of the 3 people, right? Amazing. Hefker. This is like the high-end Arabian racehorse worth millions of dollars, and now it's hefker. Amazing, right? All I need to do is be there first thing after Shabbat, and after the earliest time of Shabbat, I'll go make a kinyan and chazak baruch. I got millions of dollars for free, right? So the Rama, don't get too excited. Nobody could acquire this besides from this person. It's hefker. No, it's hefker only for saving himself from isur doraita. Right now, that sounds pretty bad. So says the Chafetz Chaim like this. He doesn't want this to stay hefker forever. He wants it to be hefker just to save him from not having to transgress isur doraita of shvitat behemto, but he doesn't want this to be, forever hefker. Now, there's a lot of back and forth because at the end of the day, you made it hefker, right? So in Sherut Tshuvot Divrei Shalom, he has a long arichud saying that even if the goy, let's say, wants to have this animal for himself, or wants to give it to a different Jew, b'matana, then the goy could do that, right? Because it's hefker. It is hefker that works. But minastam, the goy doesn't know that this is hefker. In a regular case, the goy is not going to know that this was hefker. It's in his domain, right? And the goy doesn't know about it in order to acquire it for himself. And the yid cannot go and make acquiring halachic kinyan because the goy is not going to let him. Well, I think a goy is going to let somebody take the animal out of his house. Is going to shoot them before they reach it. He's not going to let us. So that's what he says. This is a hefker. But halachically should work. But it's practically not going to happen. But says the Chafetz Chaim is seemingly saying something else. Says the Chafetz Chaim, after Shabbat ends, the first moment after Shabbat, this is back to the reshut of the Jew. But on Shabbat is hefker, right? And the Gemara supports this idea that even if you make a hefker of that nature, that for Shabbat is hefker, and then afterwards it goes back, still considered hefker. It works. Even if you say for the next 24 hours in 35 minutes is going to be hefker, that works. It's not a problem, right? Again, Machan Ephraim, in his discussions of how hefker works in the halachot of Zechiyah, from hefker, he discusses this very concept, and he does not like necessarily this Mishnah Berura. Well, he was way before the Mishnah Berura, but he doesn't like this concept of hefker leziman, that you could just do it for a few hours and then it will come back, jumping back into your reshut. He holds that if you make it hefker and nobody owns it by the end of that time, if it came out of the domain of its original owners, it'll stay there. He does not like this whole hefker leziman business. Okay, so that's that. Let's just finish this. ואין צריך לחוש שמא יזכה בה אחר בשבת גופה, שבוודאי היינו יהודי לא יניחנו כל זמן שהיא תחת ידו למחתו. We're not concerned that someone is going to, during Shabbat, go and own it, because the goy is not going to let that happen, and therefore we're not concerned about it. But we'll continue in the next Seif in the days to come. Chazak u'Berura.